A volley of rough laughter came booming into the smithy, and then a clatter of hoofs as the man without rode away. But the face of the smith was hot as flame when he turned to the forge, and as he thrust his fingers through his red beard, an angry light was in his eyes, reaching for the handle of the bellows. He blew the fire so fiercely that the rockstaff and the whole frame swayed and creaked. He then took up a bar of metal, and breaking it on the anvil with a great blow of the up-hand sledge, studied the gray surface and smiled. He thrust the bar into the white coals, and with the slicer he clapped the coals about it. Now drawing out the bar a little way to see how it was taking its heat, and now thrusting it quickly back again, he brought it to the color of white flame, and snatching it out with his pliers and laying it on the face of the anvil, he shaped it with blow after blow of the hand-hammer, thrusting it again into the coals, and blew up the fire again, laid it on the anvil, and smiting it until sparks flew in showers, worked it with a deftness marvelous in the eyes of the lad, who sat agape at the fury of his strokes, into the shape of a dagger or a dirk. At last, heating it in the coals on the redness of the blood, and throwing it on the floor to cool, he paced the smithy, muttering to himself. After a time he took it up again, and with the files in their order, the rough, the fine, the smooth, worked it down, now and trying the surface with finger-tips, now plying his file as the devil were at his elbow, and his soul's salvation depended upon haste, until the shape and surface pleased him. He then thrust it again into the coals, and blew up the fire softly, watching the metal with great care until it came to blood-red heat, when he quenched it in a butt of water, and laying it on the bench, rubbed it with a wet stone, until the black scuff was gone and the metal was bright. Again he laid it in the coals, and slowly heated it, watching with even greater care while the steel turned to the color of light gold and to the color of dark gold. Then with a deft turn of the pliers, he snatched it out and thrust it deep into the water. As he had worked, his angry haste had subsided, and now, drawing out the metal, he studied it closely and smiled. Then he looked up, and meeting the eyes of Philip Marsham, who had sat for an hour watching him, he gave a great start and cried, "God forgive us! I had clean forgot the lad." Laying aside his work, he pushed before the chair the smoke-stained table he had used the night before, placed it a bowl, a spoon, setting a small kettle on the forge, blew up the fire until the kettle steamed. He then poured porridge from the kettle into the bowl, and bringing from the cupboard a second quarter loaf, nodded at the lad, and, as an afterthought, remarked, "There's a barrel of water ain't the smiddy, and ye'd wash." Rising, Phil went out and found the barrel, with which he thrust head and hand to his great refreshment, and returning, he sat down to the bread and porridge. While Phil ate, the smith worked at a bit of bone, which he sharpened to his desired as a handle for the dirk. With light taps of the riveting hammer, he drove it into place and bound it fast with the ferrules chosen from the box under the cot. He then sat looking a long time at Phil, nodded, smiled, ran his fingers through his beard, smiled again, and with a fine tool fell to work on the ferrules. There had been a friendly look in the lad's eyes, and a friendly look the smith had got few in England. People bought his work because he was a master craftsman, But the country folk of England had little love for the Scots, who came south in King James's time and after, and a man had need to look sharp lest he fall victim to theft or worse than theft. He stopped and again looked at his guest, ran his fingers through his beard, and demanded suddenly, "Thy name, laddie?" "Philip Marsham." "Well, spell it out for me." This Phil did. After working a while longer, he laid as if in afterthought, "You'll bide wi' me a while." "No, I must be on my way." The man sighed heavily, but said only, "I taken a likin' to ye." Rising, the lad thrust his hand into his bosom and stood as if to take his leave. "Na, dinna haste. I'll ask ye to give me help wi' a bit that's yet to be done." The smith turned his work over and over. He had made a dirk with a handle of bone, bound with silver, and as he turned it, he examined it with utmost care. "'Twill do," he said at last. "And now for the work that takes two pair of hands." He pointed to a great grindstone. "He that will a guide a goin win, maun forge thick and grind thin." Sitting down at the grindstone, the lad began to turn it while the smith, now dashing water over it, now putting both hands to work, ground the dirk. An hour passed, and a second with no sound save the whir of steel on stone, and now and again the muttered words, "He that will a grind a gun win, maun forge thicken, grind thin." Leaning back at last, he said, "'Tis done, and such a work is better suited to a man o' spirit than priggin' faery." He tried the edge with his thumb and smiled. From a chip he sliced a thin circular shaving that went with a cross and against the grain. Laying a bit of iron on a board, he cut it clean in two with the dirk, and the edge showed neither nick nor mark. Phil rose now and drew from inside his shirt his small pouch of silver. "I'll pay the score," he said. The Scot stared at him as if he would not believe his ears, then got up as if to thrust the dirk between the lad's ribs. "Those are very foul words," he said thickly. "Na penny nor plack will I take, and were ye a man bearded, I'd leave ye a pudding for the hoodie craw." The lad reddened and stammered, Why, I give you thanks and ask your pardon." The smith drew himself up and was about to speak harshly, but he saw the lad's eyes filling and knew no harm was intended. He caught his breath and bit his beard. "'Tis forgiven and forgot," he cried. "I ha' taken a likin' to ye. Here's my hand on it, and I ha' made ye a dirk for a gift, and syne ye maun be on your way." With that he drew out his dirk, sheath and all, and placed the new blade in the old leather, handed it to the lad, saying, "'Tis wrought a Damascus steel, and there's no twa smiths in England could gie the like." So, with few words, but with warm friendliness, they parted, and Philip Marsham went away over the heath, wondering how a Scotsman smith came to dwell so many long leagues south of the border.